Hey, what's up everyone? Eric Rossi, the guy with the eye here today, and I'm going to give you 5 reasons why you should or maybe invest in 4K video. And I might also throw in some things to think about as well, as maybe you shouldn't and it might not be for you. One of the biggest things is the down conversion to 1080p video. It is a true fact that 4K, ultra high definition, is a wider screen. You get more pixels, you get more room, there's more depth. And when you down convert it to 1080p, you factually, literally get a sharper image because you're down converting everything, all of the information down into something smaller for 1080p, which isn't even a quarter of what 4K resolution covers. So that's one of the biggest things that you could say for shooting 4K video is that when you're using it and you're down converting it, you do get literally, scientifically, a sharper image. Number 2, moving along with that sharpness and all that room, you also get the ability to do things that you can't do elsewise, and it's like having a higher megapixel camera. You can crop in a bit more, but with 4K video, you get so much information on the screen that when you fit it down to a 1080p video on a timeline or a sequence, you can literally do pans and zooms and punch in, punch out, cropping and everything, and it looks phenomenal because you have the information and the detail to do so, and you lose no definition, no resolution as you're scaling that down to 1080p. So it's phenomenal that you can have a fake 2-cam interview and just punch in and punch out if you want to do something like that, and the end quality is phenomenal. Another reason a lot of people use it for number 3 is for better video stabilization in post editing. And that's because, once again, you have all that space, you have all those pixels that you can use to effectively stabilize, make it better, so that way if you weren't able to have access to a cam or a tripod or some kind of support system, I always recommend definitely doing that in person if you can, or actually on production. But if you can't, if something went wrong, if something was a little shaky, having 4K video gives you all that depth and information to be able to stabilize it a little bit better. It's also simply better because it has all that information for better color rendition, for color depth, and dynamic range. It's as simple as that. There is a whole lot more you could cover with 4K resolution. And number 5 is more of a personal thing, and that's if you invest in 4K video, if you do a lot of YouTube and everything like that, YouTube actually promotes and really distributes 4K video more prominently compared to regular 1080p or 720p delivery. And that's because they want to push 4K content. That's one of the largest things. And that's one, and this will kind of cover some other things. I'll cover some downsides as well. But YouTube wants 4K video. They want to push out the best sharpness that they can for the consumer, so that way they could do it, especially with their YouTube Red series and everything, that some of these are in 4K. It just looks better. And yes, you can tell a little bit of the difference, but I'm going to cover that in 1 second as well. But also 4K video has longer sustainability that, compared to 2016 right now, if you're shooting 4K, maybe 10 to 15 years, if YouTube's still a thing, which I'm sure it will be, it will still look the best that it will because it's still a high definition image. You look back to some of the first videos on YouTube that were in 360 resolution, standard definition, they look garbage because that's what it is now. It's progressed so much. So to get ahead of the trend, to get really into it or really on track is huge in that regards, and you can save yourself some quality down the line, but it will obviously be phased out at some point where we're at 16 or 20K. But all that being said, there are 3 main concerns as well for 4K video and why this might not be for you as well. And that is for cost. And a lot of these DSLRs out there, they aren't that expensive to get 4K video, maybe $2,000, if anything a little less. You can get these action cameras that are semi 4K video for under $100, or maybe like a GoPro for $200 or $400, whatever they're going to come out with this year. But it might not be for you if you can't afford the cost. And with the cost comes the need for space and storage, and 4K video are much larger files. You will need better processing speeds of your cards, reading write speeds, and more memory and more external storage and everything. So that can come in mind as to keep as well as space and cost when you're using 4K footage. Another thing, if you are in a time crunch and you might be using a 4K output, and even if you down convert it a little bit to 1080p, it will be a little bit more in your post-process rendering and your exporting, just because you have all of that information and all of that data that it is trying to use. So your computer will need to be buffed up a little bit more as well, and that's another factor to use this 4K footage to necessarily process it, even though that it doesn't necessarily look 4K because you don't have a 4K screen, which is another complaint. And that's really the last point that a lot of people harp on, is that most of the people watching does not have access to 4K. Your phone screen doesn't have 4K. Your computer monitor isn't necessarily in full accurate 4K resolution. Most TVs people have aren't 4K. And YouTube, even though it has 4K, you're not watching it in 4K. And delivery standard isn't in 4K. It's 720p or 1080p. But like I mentioned in a couple other videos when I mentioned Sony cameras, there are pushes now, especially through like DirecTV and other things, that are going to be broadcasting and testing out 4K resolution through, you know, their cable services. So overall, you got to really take everything in mind, but it is important to know that getting into the trend ahead of the trend can really help personally and for a lot of things, and to really up your quality, and it really does show. That's another complaint, is that says like, oh, there's no major difference between the look of a 1080p and a 4K video. Even looking on a non 4K screen, you could definitely tell the difference on the quality and the sharpness of an image. That's just someone being pretty stubborn, if you know, in my opinion. They just want to say no about something and complain. So be it, those are my 5 main reasons why 4K video, especially in 2016, is definitely a thing. It's definitely something you should be on the lookout for and maybe to think about an investment in. But as I said, there are some drawbacks out there to some things, and the cost and the space and the rendering might not be for you. But those 5 things that I mentioned can be pretty important, especially if you want to get serious about things or just up the quality of whatever you were doing.